Okay, awesome. So I guess we can kind of kick it off then, right? So yeah, welcome everybody to episode 5 of Turn-Based Tangents. I'm KJ,
I'm Palamune.
and yeah, we're gonna be covering Koudelka today. So it's a uh PS1 survival horror JRPG, not really survival horror. It has like horror themes, right? Um I'm gonna let Polly take it away for like exactly like giving more of the high level overview and things because I have a lot of opinions. Everybody that knows me knows I have a lot of opinions, and I have a lot of opinions about this game. So Polly, take it away.
Koudelka is basically essentially a game about the main character is called Koudelka, so it sort of links into it. And she's kind of like a individual who has a psychic like connection or whatever to like, you know, the dead and stuff like that. So she gets this like kind of how do you what's the word, vision, there we go. Oh my god, I can't talk today. Vision or whatever, of a tormented soul, and leads her to this monastery. And basically the story is just all around this Nementan monastery place, and you're like in a singular location the whole time. And what's really interesting about Koudelka, in the sense of like to give it a little bit of history, because a lot of people haven't heard of this game, a lot of people don't know who developed it, and I think I was telling KJ that I had wrote down some really interesting factoids to like lead us into it before we get into all the Koudelka stuff. Is that this game was developed by Saknoth, which was a company that was started by a bunch of people who left Square Enix or Squaresoft, sorry, at the time.
Oh,
So back
did not know
then, this
that
is before, yeah, before Enix and merged
before the
with
merger.
Squaresoft.
Mhm.
So some of the team that worked on like Final Fantasy games and stuff like that at Squaresoft left the company. And Hiroki was the one who Hiroki Kikuta. I'm really sorry if I say the name wrong. Kikuta used to work for Squaresoft and left and took some people with them and started Saknoth, which was the company that started all of this. They then rebranded as Nautilus and rebranded again, and yada yada yada. There's a
Oh,
whole
this
history there.
this changes my opinions on things. Not at all. It might actually make it worse. It might actually make it worse. But
Oh no!
I'm excited. I do like a history lesson, so
Yeah, and you're in for a treat because Koudelka is based on history, but not really. Anyway, no, yeah. So they left Squaresoft. They formed their own thing. It was kind of Hiroki's entire vision. And so they had a very large part. So it was very small. Like they were small, right? So I can't remember if this was like their first game or one of their first ones that they made. I
okay.
think it was their first one. And so they kind of he 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 definitely had ambitions, and tried. That's a polite way of saying that. And there are elements of this game that connect into later games this company makes. Coincidentally, Hiroki leaves after this game.
Oh,
So, which I didn't realize. I thought he went off to help with like the Shadow Hearts series and stuff, that which is the company is known for. And though that series is fantastic, and I thought Hiroki was part of it, but he actually left after Koudelka was finished to pursue
probably for the better.
to pursue a music career, I think
Oh, okay.
is the whole thing. So he's also the one who did like the music for the game.
Oh, okay.
um
Never mind. He probably should have stuck around.
yeah, so and then they later get like different composers and stuff for the Shadow Hearts series, yeah, like Yoshitaka and Yasunori Mitsuda, and like they have a huge good crew that took Shadow Hearts is composing, but he did Koudelka's music and stuff like that. So always thought that was really interesting that like because this company's name has changed a lot and has been amalgamated into other studios as it's gone along. It's really interesting to go all the way back and see where it started. And Saknoth had like literally came from like people who came out of Square and started this company, which I thought was really interesting and a lot of people don't know about. And I think it kind of shows in the game where this inspiration came and where some of the Final Fantasy kind of little bits of things, kind of Resident Evil bits of things, like where they're getting like the ideas and stuff like that from. It kind of makes sense a little bit more, but yeah, so that's Hiroki was the one who started the company and started Koudelka. It was kind of his baby, and he had plans to do like sequels of Koudelka, not Shadow Hearts, like direct sequels of Koudelka and
Mhm.
continuing the Koudelka stuff. But he left the company; those sequels kind of left with him more or less,
Interesting. I'm
and
really
and
curious where the sequels would have kind of that's the okay, so that's sorry to like jump in on the
no,
history
go
thing.
jump in. This is
That
great.
is the part that I'm like I don't understand entire because this game was such a like condensed game it felt like in my opinion. Like it was
Yeah.
just like you're in the monastery and like you're trying each character kind of has their own sort of reason for why they're there, but then it all ends up tying back to like effectively who ends up being like the final boss. Like it kind of it's just I don't know. It was and maybe that's why I didn't like it as much was because of the fact that it was like so condensed. But
Yeah, and it's really interesting to note that the Shadow Heart series is not like that.
mhm,
And it was interesting that the people that remained at Saknoth and they continued on, amalgamated into like Nautilus and everything, and basically made the Shadow Heart series, where they took bits and pieces of this game to build up, but also like improve upon. So you're not like stuck in just one singular location. The way the stories and stuff like that flow are different, the music is different, like a lot of the things are different, but a lot of the key things that I thought Koudelka succeeded in they kept, and then they got rid of like kind of all the rest more or less that I was just kind of like this doesn't really hit for an RPG game specifically because it's a blend of genres. Like staying in the one location worked for Resident Evil, the first one, because you're only in one mansion the whole game. And with a survival horror game that is meant to be shorter, a lot of survival horror games are like, um, my cat is meowing very
like
loud right
5 to 8
now.
hours.
Yeah, which survival horror games are between 5 to 20 hours depending on how much you think. It makes sense that they're short, whereas RPG games are tend to be pushing longer because they're very story based, and Koudelka is very more survival horror story based, and that's why it's so short. And like I think you could probably realistically your first playthrough beat this in like 16 hours,
Yeah,
20
I beat it in
hours.
about 15.
Yeah, so I
And
beat my record this time,
that
but
was
like
only after there are 3 different endings and like the first ending you get by just losing to the final boss, which I thought was really silly, but that's also the canon ending. So we'll talk about that.
yeah,
Um,
we'll lead into
but
that. So like it's definitely to it's like it's very survival horror in the length of the story, the long you are in the game.
mhm,
And so I feel like they dropped that in the Shadow Heart series. So it felt more like an RPG with horror elements.
okay.
Which I
Which I
think
think
which is the play, I think,
I
because I
agree.
think
Yeah,
this
I think
one
that's probably like I don't know. I feel like in any case, if you're trying too hard to be like everything that you're blending the of genres, like all the genres you're blending, you end up losing the identity of all of them. And I definitely felt that with this game. I felt like I wasn't sure if it was trying to be a survival horror game or if it was trying to be an RPG, right? Like I think there were parts of the game where I'm like walking around and it's like, okay, I really wish Koudelka had a flashlight because I can't see anything That was one of the first things I was just like, I really wish I had a flashlight, because at least then I would be able to see potentially their items and stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't have to potentially backtrack for things or anything like that. Like, there was this one puzzle where it was like, you have to put together, you have to like gather pieces from a like pieces of glass to put in a window. And I'm like, okay, but I missed a piece of glass. So now I have to kind of backtrack. And it was just like, uh,
which is very survival horror-esque.
mhm.
That is what you do in survival horror games. Is like you get these like, especially with Resident Evil and Silent Hill specifically, which is definitely what they've like pulled ideas from these two genres. Specifically more Resident Evil than Silent Hill, but literally that is what they do. Is that they have like these little puzzles in them that engage you into like kind of like searching locations more and like being more stuff, which RPGs generally, even if they do have puzzles, they're not quite to that extent. So that's where more of the survival horror came out in this game, is that this game the gameplay was very split into exploration, puzzle solving, finding clues, finding things like a survival horror game.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side was very much turn-based RPG, random encounters happening,
It was also
which
like almost tactics based.
yeah,
We can
yeah,
get
I
into
was
that after, but like, yeah, it
yeah.
was unique.
Yeah, it was unique, but it was like it was taking these two core parts of like what makes RPG games and
Mm-hmm.
what makes survival horror, and like slamming them together. And it just does it in a way that in some instances like disconnected you a little bit.
Oh
Even
yeah,
though I enjoyed a lot of the puzzles and I enjoyed the backtracking, but I also enjoy survival horror games and I'm used to that, doing that and stuff. Whereas KJ is not really a survival horror fan and is like that's not going to be something he wants to do in his RPG game, right? So
yeah. It's
it's
okay. So what I will say is like, I don't mind backtracking. I think for me, the the puzzles weren't even that bad. Like, I actually enjoyed going through some of the puzzles. One of them I missed there's like two halves of like a map basically, and I missed it. It's like a puzzle that has square like floor tiles with different symbols on them, and I totally missed one of the other parts, and I was just like, I'm like more than halfway through disc 3 or disc 2, I think it was. Either 2 or 3. I was like, I think it was disc 2. I was like, there's no shot that I'm cuz yeah, it's before you go outside. I was like, there is no shot that I am going back to try to find this. And I just looked up what the other half was. I was like, nope. And yeah, apparently I learned a couple of days ago that you can actually get soft locked there. So one of the people that's in chat, and somebody that I watch stream frequently, Jack Not Jack, they got soft
oh
locked there.
no. Oh
Because I popped
no. I
in,
forgot that is a soft lock
yeah, and I was
one.
just like, what? So this game definitely has some jank, but it is what it
I
is.
think because it's spent so again, so with the survival horror aspects of the game,
Mhm.
this is 4 discs long and not all the discs contain information from the previous discs. So it does make sense that you can get soft lock more easily in this game,
Mhm.
which also causes problems because it's like it wants you to act like a survival horror game, but if you're not like used to that genre of game and searching every single crevice and writing down every little clue that you find along the way, you can get stuck in some of these puzzles, and one of them being the floor tile puzzle, which funny enough, because I was trying to beat my record, because I've played this game before, but it was like over a decade ago. So when we were talking about a podcast game that was a little shorter but horror themed, I thought Koudelka would be a good one because A, it was shorter, and B, I hadn't played it in a really, really long time.
And I
But
would have never
my
touched this game unless it was a podcast game.
yeah, and I don't think KJ would have touched it. So we kind of made the deal that we would do it the podcast game, which was great because it was great to kind of for me to revitalize things. And my last playthrough, I did it in 12 hours. And so I was like, "Ooh, it'd be really cool if I could like beat my record this time away." But that same floor tile one, I had forgotten that you there like part of the solution was on the previous disc.
Oh no, is it really?
I think it is on the previous
Oh, that's
disc.
why I didn't see it.
That's where you could get like
That's
soft locked of it.
totally why I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's either on the previous disc
Wow.
or it's like just at the very beginning of the disc that
Oh
it's
yeah,
on,
no
and
shot. No
I
shot I was
had to
getting
go
that.
like I had to like really kind of go back through and like thinking about it and stuff. I found on my PC my old files from my college days where I wrote the solution down.
That is kind of wild.
Rather than Googling it, I just went back to old timey Polly back in the day when I would like keep like a Google Doc of things like this. Solution, and I was like, all right, we got this. Um, and so I was fine with it, but now that Jack is mentioning it in chat and you're mentioning it, I'm like, yeah, that is actually a soft lock, and I think
And
it's either it's because the solution is on the previous disc, or it's like just at the very beginning or something like that. So it would have it either requires a lot of backtracking or backtracking you can't do. I can't remember, but yeah, you
so
could get
it's
stuck.
really interesting that now thinking about that. So one of the things I found really cool, but also really painful about this game, save points are locked behind bosses, which I was like, I think it's cool because it's unique. Usually, especially in older RPGs, they give you a save point right before a boss. Like that is anyone that's like a seasoned RPG player knows like if you're playing a game, there's a like there's a save point, there's almost definitely a boss after it or immediately after it. But in this game, you walk into the room and Koudelka says something's not right. Or you like interact with something and Koudelka says something's not right. And then it's like, and then you like interact with it again, or you find the thing if she says it when you enter the room, and they just throw you into a boss fight. And I'm just like, what is this game? And luckily, I didn't actually like, luckily, I was able to beat all of the bosses that were right before save points. But like, oh my goodness, that is thinking about it. And I'm just like, oh, this would have been the worst if I would have actually like losing to one of these bosses before a save point. And there's only like 7 or 8 save points in the entire game. Like, I think
Yeah,
there are two. I think there are two on disc one, two on disc. There might be 7. I think there's one on disc 4, but I don't actually remember because disc 4 is super short.
yeah.
Um,
Discord is basically all the endings, more or less.
yeah, and
That's why it's
I
like
was
a
gonna
disc
say,
of
and that's the
endings.
thing. Like, these games are so filled with these games are so filled with like the movies, the like anime, like the cutscenes
Yeah, the cutscenes.
that
Yeah.
they take up so much space on the game on the disc. Um,
Yeah, so like this game is 4 discs long, and right away a lot of people are like, "Oh god, this is going to be a long game." And it's actually quite short. What the reason why it's 4 discs long is exactly what KJ is saying, is because they went cutscene heavy into it, and it was like 3D animated, and at the time they didn't quite have like the compressor software that we do now.
mhm,
And so it was very cutscene heavy, which made it be broken up into 4 discs. And when we say 4th disc is really short, it literally is like a little bit the end boss sequence and like the endings, and that's it.
mhm.
Um I think there were other ways to save. I can't really remember because I didn't really need them because I had already gone through it before. But I remember using Koudelka's audio cues if something's not right as being like, all right, I'm going to be fighting again.
Yeah.
Like, make sure
Whenever I heard,
everybody's good to go. Like, rather than like getting that save point before the boss, you got it after, which is sometimes what survival horror games will do, where you kind of just end up running into a room and you're like, oh crap, there's this big enemy. And then afterwards they're like, save point.
yeah,
You're
and
just like, it's very different.
apparently there are like random areas where you get like a description or something, and you can like press square and save. I didn't know about that. The
Oh, I
only
didn't.
I
Oh,
saved
okay.
my saves were um at the actual save points, and then right before the end boss, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna save outside of here. I like
Yeah.
stated it, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, in case I have to come back to grind because I don't know where else there's a save point. I'm gonna save state here and then go fight the final boss. I fought the final boss, and I was just like, okay, well, I got an ending and I got the canon ending. I couldn't beat the boss. Time to go back and start grinding. And yeah, it was. But yeah,
Yeah, so that's really interesting because I don't think I don't know if I knew that back when I first played it, but I didn't realize that there was prompts where you could like save outside of that.
I had no idea.
I just used the saves that they would give you like basically after the bosses, more or less. And because I had already gone through it, and it was kind of funny playing this game again and having forgotten so much of it,
Hmm.
and all the like the little plot points and stuff like that in it that later on connects to other stuff. But like it was really interesting for me with the survival horror elements of it, that I hadn't played as many survival horror games at the time as I've done now. So actually playing this game and seeing that it had taken a lot from Resident Evil, in a lot of ways, and like that survival horror genre, just like you said with the bosses, it's very classic for survival horror games to give you the save point after the boss.
Yeah, I had
and
no
like
idea.
and that you kind of like stumble into these bosses or these really hard enemies and you're like, oh crap, and you have to like panic figure it out. And I think they were trying to create that sort of dynamic. The only issue is that because it was turn based and a lot of the bosses were easier, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I think it was less of the panic like you are in a survival horror game when you're like, oh my god, I have like no ammo and I have to fight this thing with ammo, and what the heck am I doing? I didn't expect this boss. And then you
Ammo.
die and you go back to your last previous save and you're like, okay, now I gotta conserve ammunition and all this other stuff, right? So they were like creating that same thing, but because it's turn-based RPG, it wasn't as like super panic.
That makes sense.
And also it got away from the trope of RPGs always giving you a save point before a boss,
Mhm.
and then you're just like stacking up and healing and everything, and you're going into it, right? So I did like that about it. I could definitely see that it is frustrating, like if you would have died,
I think this game has
but
like for me, I think it was now that I'm like thinking about it more, I think the reason I didn't like it as much as some other people do is because it was more of a survival horror game. Now that I'm thinking about it,
yeah,
I think it was
yeah,
more of a survival horror game than it was an RPG. Like it
yeah. And
has the
honestly, I
RPG
agree
because
100% replaying it.
outside of like there's no music outside of battle. That said,
No,
the
it's
battle
creepy
music
noises and stuff.
is fantastic. Like the battle music is so good. Like I will listen to that battle music assuming it doesn't like trigger me about thinking about the game, but the battle music is incredible. And like the boss theme too. Oh my god, like the music that they hit you with for the final boss. Oh my goodness, so good. But it's just like it you walk around and like if you just saw the game walking around without any battles, you would think somebody was playing Resident Evil. And it makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Like the
it
time
looks like
frame.
that, right?
Yeah.
And because Resident Evil games were, like, popping off, like, Mecca saying in chat, absolutely, Resident Evil games were popping off. I think Silent Hill 1 had come out by the point of this game. So, like, survival horror was, like, the big new in thing, and a lot of people were trying to do it, and you could definitely see Hiroki was, like, super like, you could tell he was, like, a super Resident Evil fan. And because like even just the game, like the gameplay outside of the combat system was very Resident Evil-ish. Like you kind of like having that third person point of perspective, having to
Mhm.
search a lot of things. And you're right, I think deep down, because I love both genres, I think I appreciated this game much more because I really like survival horror games, but you're not a survival horror fan. And now replaying it and having played so many survival horror games myself at this point, I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's more survival horror with RPG elements rather than being RPG with horror elements, which is what the Shadow Hearts series is.
Okay.
And so they reversed it for Shadow Hearts games. So like they put the RPG and the horror elements is the side thing,
Mhm.
and it continued the series off that way. Whereas Koudelka is the other way around. which I didn't think about it until I replayed this game, and I was like, wow, it is so much. It reminded me so much of Resident Evil 1 being in the mansion and everything again. And I'm like, I did not remember this when I first had played through it. And I think it's because I hadn't played a ton of like Silent Hill. I had only played when I played this game way back, which was back. I didn't play it when it first came out. I played
Mhm.
it in like late high school. I had played a few Silent Hill games and a few Resident Evil games at that point. I hadn't played them all yet. I hadn't really gotten into the series yet. Now playing it, I'm just like, ooh.
Yeah, I
All the
was.
like the little survival horror bits and pieces of it, and I was like,
Meanwhile, I'm sitting there like, let me out. Like, I need a
yeah,
palate cleanse. I need a palate
KJ
cleanse
was like, let me out,
halfway
let me
through
out,
this
let me out.
15-hour game. Like, this is bad.
I remember halfway through the game, you had literally DM'd me and was like, if we weren't doing this for the Codpass or Codpass, Koudelka, oh my god, podcast, I fused the words together. Podcast, I would have given up on Koudelka, and I was like,
It just,
okay,
I
all
don't know.
right,
Like, okay.
fair,
So, from an RPG perspective, it was interesting in the sense that,
yeah.
like, you
There's
level up your
differences to it.
characters and you get to put everything into these different skills. And one skill in particular I thought was really cool was so your like magic defense, it raises your, I believe it raises your MP, and it also makes it so that like you defend against healing magic too effectively. So the higher your magic defense, the less healing does to you. So I was like, and it was like pi. That was the abbreviation for it. And I'm just like, oh, this is cool. Like that is a
Yeah,
cool thing because it forces you to um it really forces you to kind of think about building your characters. And that was like my favorite part of this game was like building my characters and kind of looking at it because I was like, okay, fine. I'm the way I'm gonna do this. Like, they were like, oh, Koudelka's like a witch or whatever, and I was like, you know what? Fine, Koudelka's gonna be my mage. And then you got, I think his name was Edward, and I was like, this dude's kind of the big brute idiot guy, so he's just gonna be at the front. He's gonna be my tank. And then I had James, and I was like, he's gonna heal. Like, and that was pretty much it. I played this entire game literally Koudelka just spamming magic. Like that was how I got through most of the game.
that's
Like,
really, really interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
let's talk
Koudelka.
about the let's cycle into the like the battle system and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah,
Like, 'cause I think this is one of the highlights of
I
Koudelka
agree.
is its battle system.
Mhm.
And like you said, you can like raise you can like use like basically you can level up your characters, but you can also level up like your weapons and magic,
Which I thought was awesome.
which is fucking awesome. Yeah, I agree. It was such an interesting concept. And like you can change it from where your like weapons were doing more damage or your magic was doing more of an area of effect. There was just so many things that you could level up and you could really customize your characters and stuff like that, however you wanted to
Mhm.
customize them. But what I also liked is that it reminded me, like the battle system reminded me of like D&D almost.
Huh.
So it was like you were on this kind of grid and you had
Mhm.
like squares that you could move, but you could like move your character and then attack,
Mhm.
which is very like D&D-esque. And also
Interesting.
very like turn-based tactic games, right?
I was gonna say
So
I got very much a tactics aspect of it, and
yeah,
I
I
thought
think
the
because you've
really.
played more tactics games than I
Mhm.
have, that I immediately think D&D, but I think tactics games had like come a little bit from D&D and then made their own things. So it's probably more like a tactics game, personally. But I thought that was really interesting, and I always had fun with the battle system because of that. Like you could like really like strategically put your characters different places, and yeah, I could basically customize them as you want. My only gripe was that you could end up with you basically they had survival horror aspects into the battle system, which I get they're trying to tie the two genres together, but like the two things that frustrated me with the battle system was the inventory space was very limited, which
Oh,
is
I didn't really have a
very
problem.
survival horror, which it's not a big issue. I think you could get through the whole game without it ever being a problem,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
never had a
very
problem with the
cue to
inventory.
like me being upset at like Resident Evil and only having like 6 spots to hold items. It's very akin to that, right? So I'm just like, but I never ran into the issue personally. I
Okay.
just could see it being like if you were like hoarding items or something like that. But the big thing was the weapon breaking.
Don't let me level up my weapons and then they break. I I realized like after beating the game, I went back and started looking. I found the second best sword in the game. It broke on me in the final fight, in the third form of the final boss. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? The
Oh
final fight,
no.
and it broke on me, and I was like, okay. And at that point, I was like, all right, I had to shift my strategy because I was just like, Edward's useless now. Because he had this awesome sword where he like attacks and he heals from the sword. And I was like, yo, this sword is dope. Like, I love this. This is awesome. And funny enough, I actually found, I guess, the best weapon in the game too, but you have to beat the stupid gargoyle at the end of disc 2. And I wanted no part of that. I was like, that gargoyle can stay living, whatever. Haunt this monastery, do what you gotta do. I don't
KJ did
care.
not fight Gargoyle.
Yeah, that gargoyle was a pain. Um, but yeah, I was just like, you know what? It got to the point where after that sword broke, or like any time one of James's weapon, or not James, Edward's weapons broke, he was just in the front and I was just healing him and casting magic with Koudelka. That was literally, he was just punching stuff and I was just casting magic. Or he turned into one of the things that I really enjoyed about the combat was you could buff your characters in battle. And so
Yeah.
you could, for instance, you could buff their HP and it would like actually raise their HP meter. So I had all my characters at almost max HP. And then it was like fortify. Yeah. So
Smart.
then I could basically like fortify their HP and they would have maxed out HP. And I was like, oh, cool. So like that's what I started doing in boss fights. I was just like, we have max HP now. Now let's do this. So
And that is legit one of the strats to the game to make sure that your like HP and everything goes up and stuff like that is to do that in every battle and everything that you're doing.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really interesting that it
Oh yeah.
made you want to buff more because like one of the podcast games we've played, Grandia, we had a laugh because I made a character do a bunch of buffs and KJ was like, nah, I just attacked. It's fine.
I
And
got a
so
sword and I'm ready to use it. That's literally I had,
yeah.
Justin, a sword, and a dream. And that's how we got
Yeah.
through the game.
And I love games where they make it that buffing is more beneficial and stuff like that, and Koudelka, it's very beneficial to buff your party, which is really, really fun. I like those aspects of games, and it's funny how many times I go through my RPG history and how much I do buff and how much I do, like, raise people's attack power, defense, and stuff, and then, in the back of my mind thinking, "It'd be really cool if this actually did more than just do this each battle where it, like, actually carried over," right?
Yeah,
And,
I've noticed
yeah.
you do have a tendency, like, I mean, just like a
I'm
Golden Sun.
learning,
That's
okay.
literally how you got through Golden Sun, and that's the first time I've ever seen that. Like, and I don't think to like I'm just like, oh, if I need to sort of revamp, and this game definitely pushed me to do that a little more because it was available, and like the amount of other resources you have aren't necessarily there, but yeah, I was like, okay, this game gives me this and I'm going to use it because why not? And it worked and it worked
100%.
well, right?
It was so fun, like, I can't like, besides the weapon breaking system, which was, like, sometimes infuriating when you, like, broke with, like, a really weird
Sometimes
weapon, and then you run it around like, I spent half the game punching things. So, like, that was watching, like, Koudelka run up and, like, karate chop or, like, Edward
half
go
the
up and, like, just
game?
punch.
Oh no.
So, like,
Nah.
oh, I was having so much like, I was yeah, I was breaking things left, right, and center,
Yeah,
but I was
that
also
and
trying to
ammo.
find, like, little bits of the game that I hadn't before, little tidbits, little secrets, and stuff like that, yeah, like, the best sword of the game, we're never having to fight the gargoyle, and that's really sad that it broke during the end boss fight, though, but all in all, like, the battle system, I think is a solid, like, it's really, really good. I like that the buffing system was. I like that you could customize the characters however you wanted. I liked the grid system. I thought it was really fun and, like, um, Yeah, I would say like one of the big highlights of Koudelka for me was the battle system. I thought it was like I wish they would take some of this and put it into like other games. You know what I mean? There's like certain little bits like the buffing, because
Mhm.
I'm constantly buffing in games, and I love buffing in games, and I feel like that's like my big my my big thing in RPG games is that I do that all the time. And so like it's so fun in this game that I was like super rewarded to be that kind of player.
Yeah,
Um
so I one of the things that I thought was really
so let's talk
cool
about, okay, go for it.
about the grid system, I just want to
Oh, the
very,
grid
very
system. Yeah,
quickly.
go for it.
Um, I thought it was cool that you couldn't advance past the enemy. I actually thought that was really cool. Like you can't like there's like invisible barriers and it works the same way with your character. So that's how I was able to basically just use Edward as a just like shield because I could put him there. They couldn't advance past him and then I could just cast magic. So he was almost like a
Oh.
barrier.
Oh,
So
so you
yeah.
basically made him like a tank where he
Yep.
was just
Oh yeah,
like
he was a
he
tank,
just is like a
100%.
wall. That's
Mhm.
really interesting. I like that gameplay. I didn't even think about that
Oh yeah.
actually.
No, I was trying to get through this game as fast as possible, so I abused any mechanic I could.
That's fair. That's
Like,
fair. That's
I
fair. The
abused
funny thing
any
is I
mechanic
still
I
beat
could.
my score, but like I was also trying to do like little extra things and stuff like that that I hadn't done in a previous playthrough. And then also this time with like the battle system, I was a little bit less like he's the wall and then everybody else. I was using Koudelka and Edward together
Mhm.
and just kind of like attacking and like doing like a like hitting him, like basically going on either side and like attacking and stuff like that. And it started that, but now thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, that would have been fun putting Edward as like the meat shield
Yeah,
and
no,
stuff
they had
because
just everybody had distinct roles in my playthrough. Like,
that's great. I
I
mean,
basically
I
had
think we all universally made James the healer.
well, he
Like
was
that
more of
just
like a it was interesting. He was kind of just like he was more like a red mage almost because like
yeah.
he healed, but he also sometimes attacked and he did sometimes use magic, but most of the time he was healing. And then, like I said,
Yeah.
Koudelka just like there was a point where I was hitting like 2 or 3 thousand a spell with Koudelka. Like I was just
Nice.
I was just spamming magic, and I
That's
ended with like
awesome.
almost 500 MP. Like it was something crazy.
Yeah, it's so fun that you could like literally like customize them that way, right? And then yeah, this kind of leads into the characters a little bit. Now that we've talked about the battle system and stuff, I want to talk a little bit about the characters because you just have the three.
Unfortunately.
Which yeah, unfortunately. But also very classic like survival horror, very minimalistic characters. So, and JRPGs tend to favor like having bigger parties and stuff like that. This particular game again leans back into the survival horror thing where there's very few characters in the game, even in just NPCs, because you're in a singular location. So it's really interesting. So we keep name dropping. So the three characters that you get in this game, you start off, you have Koudelka. Koudelka is like psychic, and that's why KJ was like, "Ooh, psychic mage power. Let's go mage," because it makes sense, right? And it's like I think a lot of people think of that early on for her, because she has these like psychic abnormal powers and abilities, and that's kind of what leads you to this monastery in the first place. So you have Koudelka as like, it's your main character and stuff like that. I loved her appearance. I thought her outfit was I liked her outfit. I liked that it was kind of blending survival horror kind of outfits where they're not necessarily the most practical, but also RPG elements and stuff. Like she had a really interesting character appearance, in my opinion. And then you get Edward. And the best way I could describe Edward is that he's just there. So like
He is just there. That's so
Koudelka comes
true.
in with a purpose. And then there's Edward being like, "Hi, I'm just an adventurer. I'm here." And his appearance reminds me of Rick O'Connell from the Mummy movies, if anybody has seen those. Like mixed
It's
with
been a
like
while.
Leon from Resident Evil. Like if you like merge those two together and you have Edward, and like he's there, he's like the like he's in it for like adventuring and thieving and money and yada yada yada, but he's just kind of there. That's like, all right. And then you have James, which James is more of like the classic sort of priest. He's a bishop, but like the whole priest trope kind of classic thing with him, cross and stuff like that, and he's in there to like recover a stolen tome, more or less. And so like Koudelka and James have a purpose to be there, and Edward is just kind of like, yo, I'm here for the cool vibes.
Pretty much.
And that's exactly how I pictured it the whole game. It was just this like, he's just like there, but like James is also like that very very stereotype I find that is put into RPG games, where he's just kind of like he's just kind of like the priest character, and he has a lot of that role and stuff like that, bishop role and stuff, and you're just like, okay. And like for me, I really loved Koudelka. That the other two characters are like, eh.
I'm gonna go out on the record and say all of the characters in this game, other than Koudelka, are bad. Like, I'm just gonna. Oh no,
I
not
mean,
not all of them. I also liked Roger Bacon.
oh,
The
good. Oh,
warlock
good.
dude.
Because I have stuff to talk
I know,
about
I
of
know
him
he's in
later.
future games, but like other than him and Koudelka, everyone else can just be thrown in the trash.
Yeah.
Like
Honestly,
all the other characters are bad.
Rogers is fucking fantastic, and I can't wait to talk about it a little later in the podcast when we start talking about like the connections and stuff like that of future Shadow Hearts games and stuff. But like him being in this game is great. And yeah, Koudelka is great, and stuff. And yeah, basically Edward, yeah, like the stereotypical himbo kind of character, right? I mean, he definitely had chemistry with Koudelka, but it was very much like, yeah, like Koudelka, they did really good on her character, her development, her appearance was really interesting. I've always wanted to cosplay her. I thought she looked kind of cool. And like and then like Roger Bacon was also, which is great, because you saying that makes me so happy, because it's the reason why he's carried on
He just rolls
in
up out
future
of the
stuff.
he rolls up out of a casket, and you're just like, he's here, and now he's just randomly chilling in the library. I was like, you know what? I can get behind this. Like, I can get, and you also see him in the cemetery area. I was like, okay, you know what? I can get behind this.
Yeah. It's funny. He starts off as a little bit of comedic relief into the scenario, right? And it's so funny that they've just kept his personality the same in every
Oh, that's
iteration
good to
he's
know.
in.
That is good to
So
know.
like he's just a fun character. I'm loving that they threw that in there. And that this is actually what started his whole little trope, is because everybody loves Roger from Kojaka if they've played it. So like they continued on with that. But like there's I mean, Edward is definitely a character type, and you either love that character type or you're mad about it. And I'm just like, yeah, like I like the bonding between him and Koudelka that happens throughout the series as it goes along and everything. And there, there's other spoilery stuff I could talk about later. And then like James, classic kind of priest thing, and all the other ones, yeah, that you run into. There's only a few other like NPC kind of characters that you're running into,
Mhm.
and they're yeah, they're there.
They just set
But
them
it's
up
just,
for like some gruesome, brutal like death scenes. That's basically
I
what
mean,
happened for.
that is survival horror again at its core. It just keeps cycling back to this. That is a survival horror thing to do. They do that in Resident Evil games. They do that in Silent Hill games. They like give you these NPC characters, and you're like, okay, and then they like die in very horrific ways, and you're just like, okay. That is a very classic survival horror thing to do. So again, like they definitely pull stuff there, that you don't typically see in JRPGs. I mean, there are some pretty bad like deaths with some characters in JRPG games, but like this this is just basically setting it up more or less, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of like talking about the characters to that stuff. When we talk about like the music of it though, I feel like this is where Koudelka again excelled at.
The music
Uh
was
I thought
great.
the I thought the OST was great.
Mhm.
It was a great soundtrack, great blend of like, and when you're like outside of battles, you kind of have like a little bit more of like the survival horror-y kind of feel atmosphere you're getting. And then when you go into battles, you get this awesome battle track and like these awesome like little musical sequences, and I'm just like, okay, I like this. I like the OST is good. I love listening to it. It's on one of my like rotations and stuff like that for OSTs. I think Hiroki did a great job in the music, and it makes sense because that's what he ended up going into career wise, is going into music like full time kind of idea.
Yeah, that battle theme. Oh my goodness, that battle theme is
Oh,
fantastic. And again, like I
oh, it
said,
hits.
okay, hold on,
And a
hold on.
lot
Let
of
me
the
see if I
boss
can.
battle themes and the end boss battle theme KJ mentioned earlier. Oh, it's so good. Like the music of Koudelka
Hold up,
is really, really
I got it.
good.
I found it. It's so good. It's so good. Like this battle theme slaps. It's so good.
Yes, let's go. I guess you're playing it on I can't hear it.
Oh yeah, I
I
did
mean,
play it.
I can groove with it
It's
because I
so
already know what it
good.
sounds like, but
Like, oh my goodness, I love it. This is fantastic. And then and then it drops. It's just it's so good. Okay, sorry,
yeah,
I
yeah,
got
the music is
sidetracked.
great. Like I don't think like honestly, if you hit up this game even just to listen to the soundtrack, go get the soundtrack. It's so good. Like the OST was done well, and you can tell that's where Hiroki's like one of his talents is, right? Absolutely is in music, and that's what he ended up leaving the company to do is pursue more music stuff. And it's like, oh, this is perfect. And it's crazy that I like the music so much because none of these composers are in. Or Hiroki's the one who did all the music composition. He didn't work on the Shadow Hearts games. It's a different it's different composers, and the music is good. Like
Really?
they
Okay.
continue that trend. So they like took Hiroki's work as like inspiration from the Koudelka game and like continued on in the Shadow Hearts series with like their OSTs, and they're all like every Shadow Hearts OST is great. I love it. I prefer Covenant in the world and from the New World soundtracks a little bit more than the original Shadow Hearts, but they're still all really good and they have really good banger tracks. So if you like the battle songs and stuff like that at Koudelka, you're gonna like them in Shadow Hearts. But I
They were
like that
definitely
they set that
fantastic.
up. And they're like, and a lot of like the instrumental music are like the instruments that they use for it. It's just bopping. Like honestly, like the soundtrack is great. Then we go into the voice acting. KJ, you want to talk about the voice
The
acting?
voice acting was you know what? I'm going to I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. It was PS1, but like, oh man, the cutscenes
Small
were dope.
studio.
The cutscenes were dope, but the voice acting was for now, it's definitely for like if you compare it to anything now, obviously it's terrible. But
For
for the
its
time,
time,
for the
being a
time it
small
wasn't that bad.
studio, and how cutscene heavy this game is,
Yeah, that's fair.
it's good. Like Koudelka's voice actress, I don't know who she is, but she did a great job. Like I liked Koudelka. I thought Koudelka, like the voice actress, captured the character fairly well.
Okay,
But
that's fair.
it's definitely, in my opinion, like some of the areas are a little, like some of the voices are a little rough. But again, PlayStation One era, which was already unique to have voice acting. It not very many PlayStation 1 games have voice acting. Like look at the Final Fantasy series. None of them do. In like PlayStation era, I mean. And so like it was very like, and it was a small studio and like they had a small pool of like voice actors and stuff like that to even grab and choose from and stuff. So I liked it. And especially with how cutscene heavy this is. Like the cutscenes, all the cutscenes are great.
Yeah,
Like
the
they
cutscenes were
look,
solid.
yeah, they look good for its time even. Like it's a PlayStation 1 game and it looked fantastic
I
for
think
its time.
I do
Um
have some.
There's some, like, little weird, like, facial expression issue, but again, that's I find that's more of a comment of how facial animation and rigging and stuff like that happened back in the day, and that's just more of, like, lack of technology, that I later found out when I started doing game development myself and everything and learning how to rig and everything. I'm like, "Oh, okay. Okay, this makes a lot more sense." So I can be, like, very forgiving about it, but I did like a lot of the cutscenes. I thought they were really good.
I do want to I do want to see, like, I do want to talk about one thing that really, really, like, on the topic of, like, we'll go from the cutscenes to, like, the graphics. This game came out in 2000. Like, oh my goodness. How did this game come out in 2000? The graphics in this game, like, this would have been great for, like, 1997. But, like, we're talking about right at the end of the PS1, right at the beginning of the PS2. Like, this game came out around the same time as Legend of Dragoon. How? Like, how? It was rough. That part was definitely rough. Um, and hearing that there were, like, now hearing there were former Square devs on this game, I'm confused. I'm real
I don't know
confused.
if any of the artists pulled over, and I think it's because they put all their heart into the cutscenes, and I think that's where their budget went. So I think they were a little bit, because Hiroki did a lot. Like, Hiroki wore many hats, did the composition, wrote a lot of story, did some of the character animation, character modeling, all yada yada yada. So like, it was very very small, and even though they were ex Square people, I don't know if there was any artists specifically that came over, like specifically like talented and stuff like that. There might have been, but I definitely feel like they put more money into the cutscenes, than like the 3D models and stuff like that of the game. And I think, I have to triple check, but I think they've been developing this game for a while. I think they started because I think some of these people worked on Final Fantasy 7, if I can correct, and then left.
I would have thought
I
Final
think.
Fantasy. Yeah, I guess that's
I
interesting.
think 7, maybe 8. I'd have to, like, look at the timeline to be to be absolutely specific, so I don't wanna, like, super, like, definite say that. But, yeah, I think they spend a like, I think they pushed a lot into the cutscenes and making the cutscenes really, which they were great, really enjoyable, really immersive, which is, again, a very survival horror thing to do. It's focused more on, like, the cutscenes and, like, the dynamic that way and putting in the voice acting. And what Mecca mentioned in chat is a very good point, is that the voice this game had more like I I think Metal Gear Solid is one of the only other games that had this much voice acting in it. And so for that, for such a tiny studio to do and stuff. So like, I guess on my end I can like forgive the graphics not being like Legend of Dragoon level when it came out at the same time, because that had a huge team behind it. Whereas this is a smaller team and stuff like that. And to be honest, there's parts of it that I really, really liked, and you could definitely tell that's where their focus was. Music was great. That's their focus. Voice acting was good. It's sad to hear that the actress didn't do anything further for Koudelka, but Koudelka was great. The cutscenes were really, really good. So, like, the fact that they were able to do the cutscenes well, I think maybe if they would have had a little bit more money, and a little bit more time, I think the game would have looked a little bit better.
Okay,
Um,
that's fair. I
yeah,
guess in my head, I'm thinking like SNK published this game, right? So if SNK published this game, you're talking about a company that does have money. So that's why I'm thinking like
yeah.
there's gonna
I'm
be
wondering if the
some.
publisher didn't, like, put very much money into it because it was, like,
That's
basically a
possible.
big risk, because it was a
That's very
new
much
title,
possible.
brand new IP. I think maybe they just didn't put the money into it that we would expect from a big publisher, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Okay, I can
So,
get behind
like,
that.
I think again, I wouldn't know because I wasn't there, I wasn't back there, and then, they don't really say a whole lot of that. But it feels to me like because it was a brand, like, even though they were ex-Square employees, it was still a brand new studio, trying a brand new IP, trying a whole new idea of blending horror and RPG together. because it hadn't been done.
Mhm.
And so I think probably the publisher was like risked and didn't want to put as much into it. And like Hiroki had so many hats in this company and was responsible for so much that I think it was his baby, right? So I think afterwards when Shadow Hearts started, it definitely had a bigger budget. You could definitely see that Shadow Hearts was done by a bigger team. They were given more they were given more money, they were given more chance to thing, and you could see that through the 3 Shadow Hearts games later. That I feel like if Koudelka would have just got a little bit more of a budget, fine-tuned the graphics a little bit more,
Mhm.
and maybe even like had it like a little bit like longer think like that, I think this would have been a really, really like I think this would have been on a lot of people's favorites list. I just think like small budget, trying to blend too many ideas together into one, and all that sort of stuff kind of like got in its way a little bit. But like,
Mhm.
so I guess on my side, I could kind of forgive the graphics, but that doesn't mean that you aren't correct. That like looking at other games, and I think that's why this game got overlooked by a lot of people, is because like Final Fantasy 9 had come out, Legend of Dragoon. I think Final Fantasy 9 came out.
Yeah, you're
Yes,
right.
99, right?
Like 99, 2000. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like Final Fantasy 9 came out, it looked great. Legend of Dragoon came out, it looked pretty good. So like I think it got swept under the rug because like a lot of people kind of looked at it and went like, eh. There was other nicer looking JRPGs, and PS1 has a lot of JRPGs on it. So but I think like I am very, very glad that this exists though. Like
I think
for
it's
some
good
reasons.
to have something. So that's the thing. Even though I didn't love this game, I think it's still good to have something like this just because it is
Different.
different. And that's like it's taking a chance. And I can respect that, right? Like I can respect that.
Especially back in a day that it was really hard to take a chance in. Because like it was really hard way back when to like start new studios and like you were basically
Well, yeah, in the
not
RPG
paying
market,
people.
it was like Sony had a couple of things that they had their names on, and like Square had all of their games, and Enix had their games, and that was basically it. Like, and then you
Yeah,
had
and,
so
like, a
that
lot of,
was
like, little JRPG games that you would hear about or you find about long later, I mean, a lot of them were small studios that didn't even pay people until after the game launched. So, like, it was a lot of passion projects, and you see that a lot nowadays with indie studios and stuff like that. That's still a thing even today. But you have RPG giants now that have a lot of money and a lot of funding behind them that they can be publishers on even small ones and really help them out, which back then there wasn't because a lot of people like even though there was a ton of JRPG games at the PlayStation 1 era, it you could definitely tell that it was a lot of like a lot of them, like were lower budget and stuff like that. And a lot of them went pixelated because it was an easier style at the time to do. So you got a lot like you got the Breath of Fire series, you got Grandia series, you got Star Ocean and stuff like that, where they relied more on pixels to kind of like maximize their storytelling and stuff like that. And it's not until we start seeing PS2 era come around when we start to see more and more funding being put into these genres and stuff like that. So like I feel like it's definitely a product of its time of being a indie RPG game trying to do something very different. But like if you're just like comparing one on one, yeah, like Legend of Dragoon looks better and stuff like that. But like in similarities, Chrono Cross came out shortly around this time too and is very similar graphics, just better looking cutscenes, in my opinion.
that's fair. I've
Like
not played Chrono
blocky
Cross, so
fists
my
and blocky fists and stuff. Yeah, if you play the original,
I'm
like the
gonna play the
remaster
original, but
version,
yeah.
they obviously fixed that sort
Mhm.
of stuff, some of that stuff. But like in the original, they have like very blocky kind of like fist kind of stuff, and it's like that, but darker tone and very like dark like element and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, let's see. Yeah, so story. Wow, let's talk a little bit about the story, maybe a little bit, and how
Sure,
it all
kick us
kind
off.
of. Yeah, so like more or less we've touched based on the story a little bit, where you start off, Koudelka's coming because she's had like a vision of a tormented spirit or something like that. So she goes to this monastery to investigate. Edward's just kind of there hanging out, being like, yo, what's up? And then James is there to like recover a tome, right? So as you're going through, you're kind of uncovering like the secrets of this monastery, right? So you're like searching a lot of areas and stuff. It's very survival horror-esque with its puzzles and stuff. You got to really search places. And you're going through, and then like generally when you're seeing NPC characters, it kind of leads into horrific ways they die or have died or
Mhm.
whatever, and like boss fights and stuff like that. So it is it is a game that it ends up being quite short as a result. So even though it's 4 discs, that's very much because of the cutscenes. This game, if it didn't take up so much space with the cutscenes, would probably have been a disc, maybe two, in
Yeah,
terms of
probably.
like story
Probably
length.
probably a disc or two. That's probably a good call.
Yeah, and like more or less, it's just it's all this like really dark, like, oh my god, like I like, okay, I like I like the dark esque portions of it. And one big thing that Koudelka starts that Shadow Hearts continues, which I love, is that it's actually set in real history, but fictional. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? So
Yep.
like it takes place in like 1898 Wales, with the monastery Nemeton. I think the monastery actually exists. Please don't at me if that's actually fictional or not.
No
But
idea.
like it's taking place at a real like a real place and stuff like that. And while it isn't accurate, it still pulls stuff from history. You know what I mean? So it pulls bits and pieces of like things that might have happened back then, and then twists them into a fictional storyline, which I like that. I like that. It's really interesting when it like very few games do that, actually.
Yeah, I
Um
definitely I can
it's
definitely get
usually
behind that.
like we're on Gaia. We're on we're on a different
Wow.
planet. We're on like
Wow. The the attack
I'm not
immediately.
saying that's a bad thing. I love JRPGs. I love those story types. But it's
Oh my
generally a
goodness.
lot of RPG games are like, set in a different world or set in a different universe or all these things. So like having a RPG game, even if it is survival horror elemented, take place kind of in real places and real like bits of history. Like there was a Roger Bacon from
Yeah,
like who was like a famous alchemist, I think was an alchemist.
but they
And
twisted
so
it so he
like
was like this warlock that is still alive and like from like the 1200s or something like that. Like there was something, yeah.
yeah, so like they have like things like that where you're just like, okay, that's really interesting that they took this thing. And like I guess I like this stuff because it's the same why I love like something like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, where they take like Egyptian elements and they actually took a no-name pharaoh that was not named, and they still have not figured out the name, around the time period that Yami is supposed to exist
Mhm.
around. And like, so it's, I love when things do that. I love when things do that, but then take it their own way and take it a big twist. And that's a lot what Koudelka does. And so you start to uncover more of the story and bits and pieces as you go along. You start to figure out a little bit more of James' history too, and like, you know how he's like into this woman and she married somebody else and blah 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 blah. Like you learn you learn a lot of this like story stuff, and that it starts to tie in that somebody James knew, Patrick Patrick
I think
Patrick,
that's
yeah,
his name, yeah.
yeah, had like married somebody that James loved, and then she died, she was murdered, whatever. And then he like goes to this monastery to try to like bring her back from the dead. Like
Yeah.
crazy like which kind of also like pulls in a little bit of like why Roger Bacon's like sitting in there too, being
Yep.
like, I'm a warlock from the 1200s, like stuff like that, right?
And then at the
So there's
same
like,
time, there's the girl that's like the ghost that her mother apparently like sent a ton of letters, but like she never actually saw any of them. So she was like, yeah, Charlotte. Yeah. And then there
yeah,
was like,
Charlotte, yeah.
that was the one part of the story that I actually kind of like, I was like, oh, this is kind of touching. Like I was like, damn. And then like Koudelka kind of like relating to her. And so I did a little bit of research of like, just like after I played the game, kind of just trying to like skim through and be like, okay, what did I miss? Blah blah blah. Because especially if I'm gonna rush through a game, I feel bad and like recovering the game, so I wanted to like see a couple of things. I found there's like a combination that you can have to like open the like open a safe to it's like a they basically like you go to a certain spot and like you complete something and then it flashes like the combination that you can use to open this safe. So they did
Okay.
that
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah,
went
yeah.
back and opened the safe. It's like a bunch of Greek letters and there are letters from Charlotte's mother in the safe, I believe it is. And then you like there's this area where you would fight Charlotte, but you don't actually fight her if you open that safe. You actually just fight a couple of chairs. um,
Oh, yeah, I
so
forgot they did
yeah, it was really
that.
interesting. That was one of the like decision making things. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So, and at that
Yeah,
point, I think
which
it's more of like a then you like put her spirit to rest almost because she knows about the letters and everything.
yeah, which kind of makes sense with like like monasteries back in the day were basically like, I don't know, crypts, church sort of places. So like it kind of makes sense that like basically Koudelka is drawn because there's a tormented spirit. So you're like dealing with tormented spirits. Like, and you're trying to figure out what, like, why she was drawn there in the first place. So I liked the whole like little story of like Charlotte and stuff like that. I
Mhm.
liked that like that sort of aspect. I wish like a little bit more of like the whole James, Elaine, Patrick sort of scenario. I wish that was a little bit more given a little bit more attention and stuff like that
They
to
kind
it
of
too,
just
because
drop that on you in disc 3.
yeah, so, like, I wish they would have given you a little bits of pieces of it, like, a little bit earlier on than that,
Mhm.
because it ends up being the end sequence,
Yeah,
right?
like
So,
the end of
it
disc.
ties into the end of the game.
Yeah, disc
Um
3, like the last like 3 or 4 hours of the game, that's what you're doing, right? Like disc 3, you go and you're like, you go to her picture and you interact with it and everything, and then like you realize that technically her body like possessed and it's some monster nonsense, but like her soul isn't resting or whatever. Like there's, I don't know. By that point, I'm gonna be honest, I was checked out, so I was just like, this is
Yeah,
like
that's fair. Honestly, this is classic also, like, I keep saying it over and over again. This is classic survival horror game stuff too, is where, like, they don't necessarily give you what's going on until, like, partway through.
Mhm.
Ones that I found excel but which have come after this, like for example, like Silent Hill 2, like from right from the get-go, you have an objective already. And then you're kind of uncovering all the twists as you go along, which I feel like that's a better setup for survival horror than just kind of like they set it up with Koudelka as being like she sees like these things of a tormented spirit. You see that. But like, and I get with like the Charlotte connection and stuff like that, and then you're kind of dealing with that she doesn't necessarily know who. But at the same time, I feel like they could have like started setting it up a little bit earlier so you had the entire game to start building up until this moment,
Mhm.
which is more the RPG side of things that I like, where it's you get like you kind of thrown into things you don't know what's going on, and you build up until this overarching moment, right? Whereas I don't find you start to build up to this overarching moment until disc 3, right? And a lot of the other stories, I'm just kind of like, those could have been included somehow.
Yeah, the story
Like,
of the game was very flat, it felt like. Like, I don't know, it felt like there like you said, I didn't feel like there was a lot of build up to things. It was just like, we're just here doing things, and it's like, at first it was like, "Hey, the people that own this place tried to poison us." and like
Yeah.
you're just kind of, and then you're like, go to a random closet to find a rope ladder, and there's a mummy in a dress, and it's like there's so many things, and it's just like these things are happening, and like you're just kind of going right, like it definitely, that from that perspective, I think that's something that hurt it for me, is like story wise it didn't feel very involved as an RPG. But
Yeah, and like I think they could have started name dropping Patrick a little early on because I
mhm,
mean it's he is there trying to like resurrect his dead wife and like and like and the experiments and everything that he's done. Like I think there would have been a little bit like just a little bit more connection to that. I think would have made it really solid because it would have made the build up to disc 3 and 4 that much more impactful of it.
mhm.
And what I like in like later survival horror games that have come out after Koudelka that I like more, and like Silent Hill, for example, and stuff like that, where they do that really well. It helps with like those twisted stories when you have that overarching ones of the thing, and you're just like, what the fuck? And like having like weird shit is very survival horror kind of aspect. Like some of the enemies were really
You mean
weird,
like
the like
random
weird looking.
you mean like random things that are like possessed and possessed dead bodies that are looking for their dolls, and you try to take a green key from them and then you almost get soft locked like that? I'm not bitter.
I mean, that does those things like that do actually happen. I mean, there's one in Silent Hill 2 that literally is a mannequin, and you're like, "Oh, it's a mannequin." And then it comes to life, and it's just a mannequin of legs, and you're like, "What the hell is this?" And it tries to attack you and kick you to death, and it's just ridiculous. But it's also like, what? There's so many of that like survival horror stuff. Like they have so many like weird, what the fuck is this moment stuff, which is very much Koudelka has that in it. Um, but yeah, it can there's little things and stuff like that that's like a little bit disconnecting for that. But I mean, once you get to like disc 3 and 4 or whatever, and it connects into like the story and stuff like that, which when we talk about spoilers, which is coming up here, I'm sure. That it when we're talking about the endings and stuff like that, or why it connects and stuff like that, it's just for me playing it even like from a survival horror lover esque like side of things, and seeing more and more and more after this playthrough of all the survival horror things that they put into it. And you definitely know Hiroki was a fan because I'm like, yes, these are like old I think Silent Hill did come out before this one for sure. So like there was a lot of weird shit in Silent Hill, and like weird things moving, and like creepy ghost babies with knives. I don't know. There's a lot of weird crap. So like it definitely is taking some of that into it.
Oh, for sure.
Um and like again, it's one of those things where it's just like it was very much a survival horror game with RPG elements instead of the
Mhm.
other way around. And I think for you personally, I think you would have liked it more if it was the other way around, which is
Oh, I
why I
agree.
put Shadowheart on your backlog.
Yeah, no, it just, I don't know. It The
Do we
story
want to talk a
didn't.
little bit about the ending bits since that wraps up the
Yeah,
story?
sure. So the story didn't really like capture me. And so this will be spoiler because we are going to talk about the endings, because I there's three endings. I only got two of them. And it's funny because I actually got the canon one first. So there's three endings. One of them, I believe the one I didn't get is the one
Big
without the pendant.
spoilers.
So
Okay.
there's a pendant, and if you throw that away or don't get it, then I think you get one ending. I don't know what that ending
Yes.
is.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um
So that ending is basically the game over party wipe ending.
oh.
Yeah, so the bad ending. So
Oh.
I didn't realize this, and I had to go back to an earlier save because I forgot that like I never had gotten this in my first playthrough of it because
Did you throw the
I
pendant
always got
away?
the yeah, I always got the pendant, and I didn't like throw it away or didn't not get it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I only have ever gotten the bad or the good ending. So I didn't know this existed until somebody in a forum had wrote that there was 3 endings. I was like, "What?" So I looked to see how to get the 3rd ending because I'm like, I want to see it, and I had to go to an earlier. This is why I save in increments. I had to go to an earlier save point
Mm-hmm.
and like so get rid of the pendant, and so you get there, and yeah, you basically get party wiped where because like you don't have that pendant protecting you or anything like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you literally get party wiped and like it's a cutscene and everything, and they are essentially just burned to a crisp, and you see them all dead
Wow.
and zombified, like melted faced skeleton bodies of your 3
Huh.
party members,
I
and it
might
goes
have to
game
go.
over.
I might have to go see this because I got the other two. I just didn't think. I was like, this probably isn't worth me getting because I got the canon ending and I got the good ending. So I was like, whatever. I'm because yeah, the canon ending, you lose to the final boss, and the final boss is the woman that James. It's like the woman, the experiment of on like the woman that James loved, and he like sacrifices himself, and that like they like they're at the top of the monastery, and he like takes his cross and does whatever and sacrifices himself, and they like basically live happily ever after because James and her both die, and uh Koudelka and Edward are doing their thing, whatever. The good ending, everyone lives because you actually defeat the boss. um but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I liked that I like that all of the endings have like a legitimate cutscene
Yeah.
and like
So
have
they all
legitimate.
have a legitimate cutscene.
Mhm.
And so bad endings being canon is kind of more or less the Shadow Hearts trope, as
Ooh,
anybody
that
who's
feels
fans
bad.
understands. But it's also in scenarios that like so is the good ones. It's very it's very hard to explain without spoiling Shadow Hearts, so we won't get into it. But
Okay,
like
so there's
all
multiple
the
endings in
endings are
all of these
canon.
games.
Yeah,
Okay.
so but with Koudelka, it was very, very clear what ending meant to be actually the one you need to do. So like the real bad one, you're all 3 of your party members are burned to a crisp. It's kind of horrifying to look at. And I was like, okay, bad ending, like you said, yeah, James had still love and wanted to free Elaine from like whatever horrific things Patrick put her through
Mhm.
and put her into this, and felt like that her like spirit was still there, right? And Elaine's actually the one who calls out to Koudelka. So like she is being tormented or whatever because she's been experimented on and he's trying to bring her back to life and yada 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 yada. So
Mhm.
like she calls out to Koudelka. So you find out like that is who she called out to her or whatever, that why she's there to like help save her and stuff. So James like, sacrificing himself or whatever to save her and everything is like quite touching. And they have this like reunion and stuff like that, like the star-crossed lovers that were meant to be together but weren't ever kind of thing. And her soul gets to rest and you save it or whatever. And then Koudelka and Edward have kind of like this little bit of a like cheeky moment. Like they have a moment where they're just kind of like he's like our like you're just gonna be she's like, yeah, goodbye. And then and she like turns to like Roger Bacon and is like, I think I'll see him again someday. And it's just kind of like, okay. It sort of like reminded me of the end of the Mummy, but if like Evie and O'Connell didn't like ride off into the sunset together, it was like she like kind of stayed behind with Roger Bacon and Edward, rode off on a horse. And like just like took off whatever. So
Oh my
um
goodness.
but like it sets things up that is connected directly to Shadow Hearts, which I'll talk about after the last little bit here. But like so that's the thing. And then the good ending just felt like you did something wrong. So right away you can see as you defeated Elaine, which it's a grind to defeat Elaine, by the way.
It was a
She's a
kind of a
little,
pain.
she's rough,
She has like
and you have
healing.
to grind.
The only
and
part that
level.
actually sucks is that she has a full heal, basically. That's
Yes,
or like a
she
third of
does.
a heal. Like it heals her third. Like it took me like 4 or 5 tries, and
Yeah.
this was after
She's
grinding out a bunch of levels.
she is tough. So you have to like grind a bunch of levels,
Mhm.
and even then like it's a little bit of a struggle with the strategy and stuff like that, and it took me a couple more times this time around to get it. I'm shocked that I got the good ending before, but I'm like, I wonder if I was just really. And then I looked and I told KJ, I was like, I was super high level. I was like, I definitely went for the good ending on this one, right? So, yeah, with the good ending, you have to grind quite a bit. She's really, really hard, and it's designed that way to deter you not to beat her,
That's
almost
funny. That's really
like
funny.
yeah.
Like,
So it's like they because the game doesn't really need a whole lot of grinding. Like there's like basically like besides the gargoyle one a little bit, there's not really a whole lot of grinding you need to do. Some points maybe level up a little bit more, but it's not
mhm.
like super grind intensive. It's like a very like it flows from one end to the other kind of thing. So because it's a short game.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they made it the canon ending the one where you lose, because the one where you win is really, really hard to get because you have to grind quite a bit and level up really, really big. And it's almost like they gave you an ending to be like, fine, if you want to grind and beat our big boss, fine, Mr. RPG completionist.
So
Here is an ending. And I'm just like, it felt like I was just kind of like, I don't like this ending. So the ending starts off with like Elaine dying, but she's muttering something, but you can't hear it. Like you can see her mouth moving, but you can't hear it. And even Edward alludes to being like, I wonder what she was saying. And Koudelka's like, dead people can't talk. I'm like, listen, Koudelka, you've literally had a spirit in your brain. What the hell kind of comment is that? Anyway, and then it so it pans to James and he's like kind of sitting there and he's just so sad. Like he's crying, he's sad, he just feels like you did something, and instantly you feel like you did something wrong.
mhm.
And he's just miserable. And while he's alive, he doesn't look happy about it. And so of everything that she went through, and she's just kind of died and stuff like that. And then Edward and Koudelka have that little bit of a moment thing, and
Mhm.
Roger Bacon has a little bit of a comment, and then it ends. It's shorter than the
Yeah, it
Batman.
is.
So you just feel like this wasn't right. So calling it the good ending, I think, is incorrect. I know a lot of people go like really
Interesting.
bad, bad, and good. I would actually call it the I don't know, completionist ending? Like, it just feels more like it's like, I just
Huh.
really wanted to beat this boss. Let's do it, than actually doing what should have been actually done. You know what
That
I mean?
is really interesting. And it's funny because like the fight that last fight, it's actually like pretty easy to manipulate the RNG. So I actually found that
Okay.
so originally I was trying to take the approach that I took the entire game, which was put Edward in the front, but if you actually keep all of your characters back and you just cast magic and like use the crossbow, the boss doesn't move. But
Oh.
if you move any of your characters up to try to fight her, she moves forward. And it's just like this
Oh, I didn't think
really
you could move if you didn't move.
she does not move. If you just sit
That's so
back and
interesting.
shoot, she doesn't move. And that I actually figured I found that out because
Huh.
I was talking to Key about this, and he first tried the boss, and I was like, I'm curious what your setup was. And he had I think Edward with a crossbow. I switched
Okay,
Edward to a
alright.
crossbow on like my third attempt or something like that, and she didn't move. And I was like,
See, I didn't know that
I
at
think it took
all.
me, I think it took me 3 or 4 attempts, not 4 or 5. And yeah, on like the third attempt, I think the second or third attempt, I switched him to a crossbow, and I was like, oh, okay, that's really really interesting. I didn't end up going with that strat because I was like, I didn't level up crossbow, so I didn't do enough. But
That's fair. Yeah, you were
I
doing
just
enough
got lucky.
damage.
I think I just
It's
got
really
lucky
interesting.
with the rotations, because again, she has a heal that heals like, I think she has somewhere between like 18 and 20,000 HP, and she has a heal that heals her like 5,500. And it was just like, it's such BS. And
Yeah, I didn't know the crossbow was like a thing to that, 'cause again,
mhm.
I didn't level up the crossbow or anything either, which is surprising with me because I usually like archer range stuff or whatever in games. But yeah, I didn't do that, and that okay, that's very interesting. Because like, if she never moves, then you never have to okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So
alright,
for
that's really
me, it was
interesting.
like there's a couple of different strats. So like, yeah, she never moves if you use the crossbow.
Okay.
Also, almost all of her attacks are reflectable. I found that out just kind of messing around. Um,
Okay,
so I was like,
interesting.
hey, I have reflect. I might as well try it, because I was legitimately like, the first time I fought her, I was just under leveled. Then I went and was grinding a ton, and I still was in a bad spot, and I was like, this makes no sense. And then like, I did it in 3 tries. That's right, because on the second try, I was like, okay, I tried to like, I was like, I'm trying everything. Like, I tried reflect, and when it bounced some damage back, I was like, oh, okay. But like, the way reflect works in this game, it's a one-time use. So you
Yeah.
cast reflect, as soon as you get hit with magic damage, the reflect is gone. So
Yes.
it was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
case where like, if she ever doubled or anything like that, it wasn't
She
great. But
attacked you twice and you're like, "No."
yeah, but
Yeah.
no, this it was like, and oh my goodness. And I remember, again, I started James off with the crossbow the third time I fought her, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna switch back to my sword and move. And yeah, but both times I tried with the crossbow, um, on James, she
And she
didn't
didn't
move at
move at
all.
all. That's really interesting. Yeah, because like, so what we're talking about with the end boss is she has, like, the 2 forms or whatever. So she's got, like, tormented body,
Yeah.
disfigured, crawls at you sort of body form thing, which is really interesting because they use stuff like that in future games and stuff like, or future Shadow Hearts games and everything, which is kind of interesting. But and then the next one is like, how do I
It was
describe this?
kind of the
She
same.
turns it
The
she
first two,
what?
it was kind of the same. The first one, she finds you, you can only damage her with magic. And it's like that
Yes.
weird crawling state. And I think the
Yeah,
second
which is
time, it's similar. I think, I don't remember. And then the third form is like the weird, like,
yeah.
transformed spider demon looking grossness.
Yeah, it's like a spider bee mantis
It
bug
it was so
thing.
gross.
It was really gross. It was really weird. It's very classic survival horror. This does not make any sense. Messed up looking form. Although that's also classic to JRPGs where like the final form sometimes just looks really ridiculous. And like really like weird and out of place or whatever, or is, like
Mhm.
on the other front, the god form. Anyway, but yeah, like it was really interesting that they pushed you that the ending that was true, which technically I don't like to call it the bad ending. I call it the good ending just because it it concludes in a way that like, while yes, James died, he and Elaine got to be together again. They got to like he got to free her soul. She was so grateful. They just looked so happy. It was like, on one hand, yeah, he's dead, but like, okay. So like it felt more like the good ending to me.
Mhm.
So that's what I've always been very confused by why people call it the bad one. But it's very interesting that the ending they chose that is the canon thing is the one you're not supposed to win, which is very out of character for JRPGs.
Yeah,
Like,
I
very
didn't
out
like
of
it.
character for that.
I didn't like it, because for me, I got that ending first, and I was like, "Oh, I could leave it," and then I was just like, "No, I have to. I can't end on an
I
L.
have to win. The,
Like, I
the
gotta get a
JRPG
dub."
notion of beating the end boss. Have to win.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm indifferent about that part. Like, I
Yeah,
think it's
so
different, but at the same time, I didn't care for it too much.
Yeah, and again, like I said, this game is all about being trying to be unique.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting they went that direction because I didn't even think about it either. And when I first beat the game way back when, I remember thinking, what's the what's the good ending? And like I want to beat it. Like I beat my RPG games. What the heck? Like I beat my bosses. Like what is this? Like I didn't think I thought again, I thought it was the bad ending.
Mhm.
And so but then when you watch the good ending, you're like this does not feel like the good ending. So
Yeah.
like it's I feel like it's named incorrectly and I think it's like there's really bad, there's the good ending is the canon ending and then the completionist ending
I don't
is
necessarily
like
think there's a good ending. Like that's what I think. I think there's a
yeah,
bad ending. There's a sort of like there's the bad ending, there's the canon ending, and then there's just
the bad end.
like a
There's
wrap
really
up to the
bad
story.
canon and bad. Like
Yeah,
like
yes. It's just like it
like
wraps up the story, kind of.
yeah, you
Like,
definitely feel like at the end of the quote unquote good ending that you've
mhm.
done something wrong. So it's like the canon ending. Yeah, so it's like really bad canon and bad. I think that's a better way of representing it. Um, which, with all of that said, the canon ending ties into the Shadow Heart series. So
Mhm.
I wanted to talk a little bit about this before we like wrap up like our overall feelings, how we would rate the game, all that sort of stuff with Koudelka, because I think it's really, really interesting. And I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything because I know, for example, KJ is going to play it at some point.
Mhm.
Some of you in chat might be good looking to play it. I highly recommend trying the Shadow Heart series. It's fantastic. But the neat thing about Koudelka is it tried a bunch of things. It didn't succeed on everywhere. It fell short on some stuff. That's fine. But without Koudelka, we would have not got the Shadow Heart series. And the Shadow Heart series goes the other way, where it's a JRPG with horror elements.
Mhm.
And even in Covenant, they dial back on the horror elements. So Shadow Hearts, they have a lot of horror elements where it's dark, it was rated 18 plus. They had like mature words, they had very graphic sort of fight sequences. They had some
Wow.
really graphic looking enemies. So like it was rated like 18 plus for a reason,
Mhm.
mature. And then in Covenant, it's actually only rated teen because they
I didn't
dialed
realize
back a
that.
lot of like the
Huh.
horror aspect of it because they didn't think it needed it, which is true. It didn't actually need it, but I still thought it was more interesting in Shadow Hearts that they did have it.
Mhm.
And Covenant, they like reduced a lot of the terminology to be more, teen friendly.
Makes sense.
And then From the New World follows suit with Covenant where they did make it mature again and stuff like that. And they had like the dark things, but they weren't like overarching as they were in Shadow Hearts.
Mhm.
But Koudelka is directly connected into Shadow Hearts, and the canon ending, and the reason why I say it is because she mentions in the canon ending that she thinks she'll see Edward again someday,
Yep.
and that connects into Shadow Hearts.
Interesting.
She connects into Shadow Hearts,
Figured that.
though she looks different. But to be perfectly honest, girl could have changed her hair. So a lot of people are like, she doesn't look like she did in Koudelka. I'm like, well, she was young in Koudelka, and people can dye their hair. So like
Yeah, that's
just
silly. That's a
don't
really
start griping on that. But like, so she's connected into that. She's connected into a character in the game. I will not say who because it's spoiler. A party member into your game and stuff like that. And it continues on where it's like bad ending, canon ending, these endings and stuff like that. They continue on in the Shadow Hearts series. But in the Shadow Hearts, they feel more there's a reason for it. Where Kadelka, I think if they would have got a second game, if Hiroki could have connected, I think they would have tied that in a little bit more so it felt more like the canon ending was like the one you're really happy that you got, right?
I'm glad they
And
didn't get a
so
second game.
yeah, I mean, there's also I mean, I think they would have done a lot better,
I
but,
hope so.
like, he had a lot of, like, ideas, and then there was even a manga. I don't know if anybody has seen the manga at all, but there was a Koudelka manga.
What?
It took it took place 6 months after Koudelka, but it kind of messes with the Shadow Hearts timeline, so now
Oh
it's not
no, throw
canon
that away.
anymore.
Throw that away.
I have never seen the manga. I have never read it. I only like read a quick synopsis of it, and I went nope. And just consider the Shadow Hearts the sequel that
Yeah, that's
made things better. And like Shadow Hearts does a lot of things in a different direction, where like it's JRPG with horror elements. The music is great. Like you're gonna experience it soon, so I won't go too much into it.
yeah,
But
no worries.
it's
I do
it's
appreciate that.
it's set into this like the same sort of like area. It's set in Wales and everything,
Mhm,
and like it also does the historical fiction sort of idea where it's like it's based on like real places and real like time. Some of the stuff is real events, especially in
mhm.
Covenant. There's a whole sequence in Covenant that's actually history, but changed to suit the fictional world and everything, and fictionalize the characters and stuff like that. So
Huh, okay.
it's just really really cool that it continues on with that. And I think all the good parts that I've listed in Koudelka carry into Shadow Hearts, and then they fix all the bad parts,
Mhm.
or all the parts that may have just been misses, in my opinion.
Okay.
um but yeah, so it's really really interesting, and I really highly recommend like checking into the Shadow Hearts series for anybody who's played this game. Jack in chat who had played Koudelka, I really recommend going into the Shadow Hearts series because it's very interesting, and I think you'll squeal a little bit at like, especially if you got the canon ending in Koudelka and you progress into this game. There's a lot of little things where you're like, oh, okay. And like some things they don't really come out and really say, but when you look, you're like, yo, yeah, that happened. So
Interesting.
yeah, KJ, how is your overall opinion and rating of Koudelka?
Before we jump into that we have two questions that I think we should answer first
Okay.
before I jump into that.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is one mechanic you'd want to see carried forward, and one you'd want to see die in this game? So I can take that. I'll take that one. For me,
Okay.
the like I love tactics games and I love sort of the weapon durability, but not being able to see the weapon durability and weapons being able to break is garbage. Absolute garbage. If you're going to give me weapon durability, I need to know how many times I can use that weapon. It doesn't, like, don't just pull it out of the sky. Don't do that. Like that's not great. So that is something that needs to die. Like weapon durability
Fair.
without telling me about it, that needs to die. I will say I really did enjoy the way that they handled like buffing characters.
Yeah,
And I thought that
I
was
would
a
say.
mechanic that I thought was really cool. And like the fact that you could even buff HP in battle, I thought that was cool. So those would probably be the things that I would go with. And like the thing is, so just to kind of comment on something that was in chat, I only had Edward using weapons. However, I only had him using specific weapons. So the fact that all of my swords broke, I was like, oh, this is dumb. Like, or most of my swords broke and then like one of them had an element that would heal enemies. I was like, oh no, this is not great. So
Yeah.
that's what I would throw
And
away.
you get a lot of weapons in the game. It's just a matter of, it would have been really nice that when you were like catering to a specific weapon type,
Mhm.
that you would have had like some sort of bar indicating when this thing may break, and or a way to maybe potentially repair it
I didn't even that's
somehow.
I agree with that, but I'm fine with not even being able to repair it.
As long
Like,
as you can see it, yeah, because then you
mhm,
could be like, okay, I don't want to use this really badass weapon until I really
really
need
need
it.
to.
Let's go use all these other things and break them in the meantime.
If I
Yeah, if we
had
could at least see it,
if I had my sword,
even if we
like
couldn't fix it.
I think it was called like the life drinker. If I had that sword throughout the final boss fight, I probably would have done it on like the second try, because it ended up being a situation where it was like a war of attrition, and eventually Edward was useless. Like after I buffed everyone, Edward was completely useless.
Yeah.
So that made it very very difficult. So
That's fair, yeah,
that
and
would be what I would
honestly,
get rid
your
of.
responses are exactly what I would do. I would the weapon system, I would trash, like, breaking system, unless you give me an indicator of when it's gonna break. Give me some sort of reference that when it'll break. That way, like, like, to save the bigger weapons for, like, the really when you need it and stuff like that. So, like, I think that's great, and then, yeah, oh my god, the buffing. I've already gone on and on about the buffing on this podcast, but I would keep that. That is such a fun thing to do to encourage you to, like, stat boost your characters
Mhm.
during even just random battles,
Agreed.
like having that carry over into the next thing was fantastic where it just doesn't disappear after each fight. I think that would be a fun mechanic that you could build into the game and offer different difficulty levels because of that. So, like, certain, like, bosses, if you've buffed your defense or something like that, would
Mhm.
be less of an issue, or like, you can have so much fun with that mechanic. I wish we could carry that on to,
It is an easy
like,
way to
another game.
break the game too, but, like, I don't know.
It
I thought it
is,
was
but, like, I think you could do it in a way where, like, it's still beneficial, but, like, doesn't end up being where you're, like, super god powered
yeah,
for the whole thing. Like, make it like something like defense and magic attack, or I don't know, like not where you could, like, be, like, super OP within, like, the start of the game. But I mean, there's a lot of games that you could do that in too that are, like,
true.
classic favorites that people love. Like Final Fantasy 8, you can make yourself incredibly OP before the end of disc 2.
Before the end of
Like,
disc 1, honestly.
before even the end of disc 1, yeah,
Yeah.
if you just, like, abuse the game mechanics that it gave
Mhm.
you. So, like, on one hand, yeah, it's the thing, but on the other hand, I think the buffing system would be really fun to put in future
Huh.
JRPGs. So what's the other question?
Okay. The other question is, would you like to see more RPGs explore darker tropes with an M or NC-17 rating? Yeah. I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, I think
Like, I feel like JRPGs can get to a point where, like, we tease about it being like, "Oh, you fight a rabbit and then you fight God." But, like, honestly, there are games that just do things really differently that still stick out. This is one of them. Despite the issues it has and the clunkiness of a lot of things, it sticks out because it tried to do something very different. And one of them was, like, the horror elements. Like, Persona 3 does that too.
Mhm.
It stuck out for me because it had kind of a really dark sort of twist look towards for a Persona game. Um, the SMT series, for example, is another one that kind of goes more darker towards darker themed stuff. So, like, I would like studios to explore that more and then not just kind of doing the carbon copy JRPG direction.
War,
Like, I
politics,
think
religion.
more like just exploring different themes and
Yeah,
trying to mesh them together and making them a JRPG. You know what I mean? And, like, just trying and experimenting, and, like, even if it doesn't hit, I can respect that they tried.
agreed.
Like, I might even buy and support the game and support the thing just to say, "Hey, you tried something different and I respect that." Which is what Koudelka is for me.
Yeah, I won't buy Koudelka because it's also a super expensive game, but
I mean, that's the unfortunate side of Koudelka, is I would encourage a lot of people to buy and play this game just to try something different, but because of the incredibly high price tag, which is not the one on my game, by the way, it is not worth this anymore. Um, it's very hard to come by, it's very expensive, and I'm like, No."
yep,
Like, it's too expensive, like, I wouldn't, like, and it's quite a short game, and while it does new interesting, like, I would say more modern games now. If they tried new things, like, the most you're gonna spend is, like, if it's super expensive thing, they might put it at the $90. But, like, 90 bucks Canadian, which I think is like $70 USD, sure, why not? I'll support it for doing something different. Kotoka is like $400.
Canadian. It's like 300.
Canadian,
Yeah, it's like
yeah, it's
300
like
US,
$300 USD. My
250,
copy
300.
without the manual is worth around 250 USD. So, like, that's a lot of money to spend on a 16-hour game that I beat in 11 and a half hours my next playthrough. So, I did it. Like, my first one was 12 and this one is 11 and a half.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not even like that. That's the thing is that money's not even going to the developers anymore. It's
Hmm.
long past that. So, like, if when it came out, I would have been like shouting to the high heavens, buy it, play it, try it. Like, it's something different. They try unique things. Yeah, they missed the mark on a few things, but like, I can respect that they really tried something new and unique.
Oh
But
man,
nowadays, with the retro community and with how expensive they are, and it's just literally going to whoever bought that game way back when. It's just nah.
if young KJ took this recommendation from you, he would have been like, when if I had taken this recommendation from you back then, it would have been bad. It would have been, you would have been on a list of people I would not have taken recommendations from again anymore. That's for sure. Um,
Do you hate me now that I made you play this?
nah, you're good. You're good. It was only like 15 hours of my life. It's all good.
So with that, KJ, what would you rate Koudelka?
Ooh, you were supposed to go first because, like,
Oh, do you want me to go
yeah,
first?
you go
All
first.
right.
Yeah, you go first.
You go first. All right. All right. So if I was to rank, so I try to think of when I'm thinking about this is the time of year or the time frame it came out in. It was trying to be something unique. It was a small studio. It was a very small studio.
Mhm.
The publisher probably didn't put very much funding into them just because they were brand new and they didn't know what they were doing and they were trying something new. There's qualities of this game that I really liked. Battle system, music, buffing system. I liked the cutscenes. I did like the voice acting in the end. Koudelka was great. I do like trying to keep Shadow Hearts aside. Because I'll give two reviews, one based on playing Shadow Hearts series and then playing this, and one based on just playing this
Holly
on
not
thing.
giving us a direct answer to something.
Okay, so like I would say probably between a 6 and a 7, somewhere in there. Just without connecting it to Shadow Hearts with it.
Okay.
I probably lean closer maybe to like the 6, 6.5.
We're closer on this
Um
game than I thought.
I like maybe closer to the 7. I don't know. Like between a 6 and a 7 for me,
Okay.
just based on that. Like I said, there are some things that definitely need improvements. It was, there's a lot of things that I could say. But I did really enjoy it. But I realize giving it that blanket review without playing the Shadow Hearts series, I say that because I think a lot of people I think a lot of people would like be like, "Oh, this is really different and interesting," but it would not be their favorite thing. And with how expensive the game is now and all that sort of stuff too, sort of ties into that. But yeah, I'd say probably between a 6 and 7. But if you're connecting it to Shadow Hearts, and understanding that we would have never had Shadow Hearts if we didn't have this game come first. It tried a few things, it failed on some stuff. It took that, it learned from it, it improved it, it made Shadow Hearts. And I love the Shadow Hearts series. I would probably maybe put it like the 7, just because it sets a tone for Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts takes it and runs with it. It's a fantastic JRPG. And like it came from Hiroki's efforts and came from this baby. I think if they would have done Koudelka's sequels, I think they would have been better, because they would have had more funding and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
But I like the Shadow Hearts instead. I like that they took pieces of Koudelka, but they didn't. It's new characters, it's new things, it's a new story or whatever. Not just stuck in a monastery the whole time. And I feel like, I love the Shadow Hearts series. It came from this. If you're a Shadow Hearts fan, I would recommend this more to play it.
That makes
Grab it for
sense.
your collection, that sort of stuff to have the collection be more complete and would be more like a 7. If you're not played the Shadow Hearts games, you're not a Shadow Hearts fan, taking that entirely out of the factor, it'd be more 6, 6.5 for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
So that
closer than I thought. We're closer than I thought we were gonna be. Um,
okay. All
I
right. All right. Let's
I
hear it.
respect your opinion. As one of my closest friends, I respect your opinion. However, this game is like a solid 5.5. Like it, I am not a Shadow Heart. I am I am not a Koudelka apologist. I have not played the Shadow Hearts games. Like this game, it gets the and a half because the music is great. Otherwise, if the music but that's the thing, the music's only only playing in like half the game. So like
That's fair, yeah.
there's that. The story, I don't really care about it. It was okay. It was like, again, I already said there's two characters that are worth a damn. Everybody else, I'm just like, you're kind of here, and like, I don't really care about these characters. Like that. I mean, the thing is, like I said, you got a dope main character that gives you a good spot in my book. Like you got good music, I'm cool with that. You have a unique battle system. You tried something different. I'm cool with that. But like, it just, I don't know. It didn't like. I've played a lot of RPGs in the last like I guess 2 years, especially, and this one stands out, but not for all the right reasons. Like this one stands out, but not for all the right reasons. What I will say is I am excited that this does like lean into like bridge into Shadow Hearts because I am interested in playing the Shadow Hearts games and I have heard a lot of good things. Um but yeah, it definitely like I don't know. And somebody had asked like, "Oh, like would you want this game remastered?" Any game developers out there, please stay away from this game. Please stay away from this game. There are far better games that have never been
We're not
touched.
even gonna get anything Shadow Hearts, let
There are
alone
far better
this far back.
there are far better games that haven't been touched. Please think about like remaking or remastering those. Like
Yeah, the
go,
unfortunate thing is like so Saknoth turned into Nautilus, and then Nautilus turned into like I don't know. It's the Shadow Hearts series is owned by a Crane game maker now. Like they make Crane games, they make like vending
are they
machine
like
things.
Konami's
It's
cousin?
I guess so.
What?
What's it called? Hang on. Hearts owned by now. Um yeah, they're Aruze, Aruze. If
Huh.
you look into them as a company, a lot of their stuff now, because they used to be like a publisher and stuff like that. So like, and I think they still do publish games on occasion. So they actually technically own the Shadow Hearts
Oh.
rights, because they bought Nautilus or whatever Nautilus became or whatever they bought that. So like, but you look at what they're doing more recently, and it's all like crane games and like vending machines and stuff. And I'm like, I am never seeing Shadow Hearts ever because I would love a remaster of the Shadow Hearts games for PS2. I would also love them to like, I don't know, even like remake the first one. But I know realistically at this point it's probably never going to happen. So for them to go that far back to Koudelka, nah, I would want them to like if they were gonna remaster or remake something, I would really love them to give it to the Shadow Hearts series. As much as like I can appreciate Koudelka or whatever, and like I think a little bit more is because I do really like survival horror games. So a lot of the silly tropes in survival horror games was in Koudelka, which would like tick normal people off, but was funny for me. Um, I think I would love for them to give attention to the Shadow Hearts series. I would like them to remaster that series. I would love for them to even remake one, remake 1 and 2 because they connect so well to each other. And if you don't want to remake 2 games, remake the world the from the New World, cuz that one had a crazy plot line too. And I was not expecting it not being actually connected to the first 2 games. So it was such a great series, and I would like give the money to them instead of Koudelka. If they were gonna revitalize Koudelka, they would have to like super revive it and give it the Shadow Hearts treatment,
Don't do it.
which I
Don't.
don't think that would do because there's not enough to go off of. Shadow Hearts had a whole thing that they built, where Koudelka was like this these random people at the monastery at the same time, sort of idea. They just happened upon each other. Yeah, I would prefer they would give attention to the Shadow Hearts series, but I don't know if that's ever gonna happen. But I like Shuriken's question there for you, KJ. Would this end up in your
Top 10 worst RPGs I've played? I'd have to think
You'd have
about
to
that.
think about it. Yeah,
I'd
maybe
have to
that will be another like YouTube
Oh, yeah, that
video.
could be a YouTube, yeah. Oh, man, that would be
That would be really interesting because I'd really have to think about it.
top
There's one right off
10.
the top of my head I
Yeah,
would
I just
think
thought
of,
of
but
one.
like
I actually there are two immediately on my list that I can think of. At three, never mind. Four. Oh wait, okay. This
okay,
is
maybe
this
this
is
isn't as
coming.
hard as you
This
thought.
list is coming together a lot faster than I thought it would. Hold on. I actually just thought of 5 games that I would put on that list.
Oh
Wow.
my god.
That was that actually it would not be in the top 5, Shuriken. I just thought of 5 games that are worse. I just thought of 5 games that were worse. It would not be in the top 5. So top
Yeah.
10 that might be pushing it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
not in the
But
top
top
5.
5? You thought of 5?
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Like I can't even like think, but
Oh
it
no,
would
I
take
just
me a
started
while for it.
one of them popped into my head and then another one popped into my head and then 2 more popped in at the same time just because I played them around the same time. Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh, there's
Oh
another one. Okay,
no.
I have 6. Yeah, I could probably put this together. I could
Maybe so to answer Shuriken's question, it sounds like a maybe by from
It does
KJ,
sound
but
like a maybe. I'm gonna yeah,
in a
definitely
top 5, no, but in a top 10,
in a
maybe for
top 10
KJ.
maybe.
I think
Yeah.
a top 10, I could think of 10 worst ones that I've played, I think.
Really?
But again, I really like the survival horror aspect of this. And if I were to get a studio to remaster the Shadow Hearts series, I don't know. I'd almost want to pick Capcom because they're doing so well.
That's fair.
So like I feel like they would like keep a lot of like the horror aspect of things, but then like just keep a lot of the gameplay mechanics as they were done really really well. I don't think they would change a lot of that. They would just like up the graphics, they would up the stuff, maybe throw in some Easter eggs of Koudelka in there a little bit more
Mhm.
than is already present and stuff like I don't know. I think Capcom would do it well just because what I'm seeing with the Resident Evil remakes with 2, 3 and 4 the remakes and how well they're doing with that I'm just kind of like I could see them doing Shadow Hearts justice in that sense and keeping all like the horror stuff in there but also just like bringing up the graphics and bringing up the character appearances and everything like that so
Okay.
like I think they would do a really good job I would also say like Square Enix would like Final Fantasify some of the characters, and I
I
like how they look different. I like the horror
yeah,
themes
I
and
don't
stuff. I wouldn't
that's a
say
bad
Square,
idea.
but I think Capcom would have a solid like if they got the rights for the Shadow Hearts series and remastered and or remade the Shadow Hearts games, like especially the first one, because it's so inground into the horror theme and it is also rated mature and everything. I think they would do a really good job.
Yeah, if Square got a hold of it, you'd get your remasters or remake or remasters of Koudelka and all 3 Shadow Hearts games, but you'd get them in 18 parts from now through 2029.
The
So
shade, the shade,
that
the
would be what would happen if
If
Square got a hold
Capcom
of it.
changed the mechanics, I would be sad. I want like the gameplay mechanics of the Shadow Hearts series is great. The turning wheel and timing it, oh, it's fantastic.
Mhm.
Like even if you tried to make that a little bit more actiony based or whatever, like it'd still be fantastic. If they change the gameplay mechanics, I'm out. But like, yeah, I that the shade, the shade thrown my
I'm just saying.
um. But yeah, this this was fun to make KJ do.
More. It'll all come back when I
I'm sure
I push
KJ will
some
get
game
me
onto the
back at
I'll push
some
some game
point.
onto the agenda. It'll happen.
Yes,
I will
yes.
push some
KJ's gonna
game.
get me back for this one. And it's so funny because I just like coyly because we were trying to pick something that we would review in October that was like maybe spooky theme to go in with it. And I was like, Koudelka. And he's like, nah. And he was very hesitant to it. But I'm like, but it's short and it'd be perfect. And yada, yada, yada. And so I definitely got him to play this game. I think if I actually recommended he play this game, he would be very angry
Oh,
with
I
me.
would be
But
very
because it
angry.
was,
Yeah.
but because it's a podcast game, I didn't put this on his backlog or anything like that. I wasn't going to be cruel. I was just like, just experience this with me, please. And then now that you have this, now that when you play at least Shadow Hearts 1, for example, you're gonna see some of the Easter eggs of Koudelka now, thanks to that. But
Sounds like a plan. So, I mean,
but
I guess
shall you?
that's kind of interesting segue into next month then. So we decided. So Polly's pretty busy with conventions, and then we've got like the holiday coming up, my birthday, a bunch of other things. So the
Yeah.
plan is the next podcast. So we're gonna have a podcast episode for November, but we're
Yes.
actually going to review a game that we've both beaten before. We're not actually gonna play a game this month. Well, we're gonna be playing a game, but it's gonna be like the start of the December game. So for December, we're gonna be covering Star Ocean 6. So we're gonna cover a new game, so that's gonna be pretty exciting.
Yes. Very
So we
excited
will be
about it.
both getting Star Ocean 6. It comes out next week. We'll both be getting that. But in November, what we're gonna do is we're actually going to cover, and I think we decided on a game, but I think we decided on a
Yeah,
game, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think we can announce it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. We're actually gonna
So
cover a very it's gonna be an interesting podcast. Especially because I think it's gonna be it'll be a fun one. But we're
yeah.
going to be covering Golden Sun. Polly just beat that on stream not too long ago. So yeah, that'll be very interesting. So I think a lot of you have heard both of us talk about it, but it'll be fun to sort of both talk about it and rip it apart a little bit. And I might have the time to replay it. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see what happens.
Because basically, like the next 2 weeks for me is all convention based. So it's like I'm convention prepping. I have to do so I knew I was going to lose 2 weeks, and then the week I come back, and everything, like I do like a celebration thing and stuff. But it's also just like breathing after an intense 2 weeks and everything. So yeah, so we talked about it, and we were gonna put in Tales of Eternia, but because I feel like it's going to be a longer game, I would be down to like a week before the podcast we were scheduling to do it on
Mm-hmm.
to beat an entire like 40-hour game that I've never played before. I think that would have been a little too intense. And then with KJ having like his birthday and like the holiday and everything in November, we just kind of talked about it and we said, you know what, Star Ocean 6 might be long
Mm-hmm.
because it's a new game, it's a new JRPG. They're trying to revitalize the Star Ocean series with this new game. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of content that we could cover. So we decided to push it into December, like around December 18th. That date's tentative, keep in mind, because if it takes longer, I think we'll be fine and we'll be hitting that date. But if it's a much longer game than we both anticipate, that may turn into like we might push it back a little bit more. It'll still be in December though. But so for November, we're gonna do it on the 13th,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, the 13th. And we're gonna do Golden Sun, which is a game I've recently beat on stream. KJ got me to play it and is a big fan of it and might actually replay it before. But we might actually put into a segment where we like show some clips and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, some gameplay footage because I have tons of it now
True.
because I
That is
streamed
very,
it.
very true.
And we might do have it a little bit more of like when we're talking about certain things, playing certain things, and be a little bit more visually that since we're not since we're going to be starting Star Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to take us longer to play and beat it. So I'm very very excited about Star Ocean 6. I'm really hoping it's good. Like
Same.
I have been a fan of the series. I just was not a big fan of the fifth one. And so I'm really really hoping that it is definitely better than the fifth one. And I'm really really looking forward to it. KJ was too. We both pre-ordered the game, so we'll be covering that. So if you guys want to play Star Ocean 6, or if you just want to wait to see how we feel about it,
Mm.
that will come in December for December's one.
Yeah, probably like a
Um,
week or so before Christmas.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
actually, yeah, we'll have to talk about that. We'll have to figure
Yeah,
out.
a week or two before Christmas, something like that. Like don't want to go to Christmas because we know everybody like has holidays and stuff
Mhm.
like that, right? So, um, but yeah, so we're gonna be reviewing Golden Sun, so that'll be next month. Some of you have played Golden Sun, some of you haven't yet. So like, encouraging if you want to play Golden Sun, like do it so we
Yeah.
can chat about it.
Um. But yeah, so I think we're good to wrap up. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good. I'm very excited for you to try Shadow Hearts. I still don't know if it'll be like your favorite game of all time or anything like that, but I think you'll like definitely see where they took Koudelka and they improved,
Mhm.
which will be very interesting now that you've played Koudelka. And I definitely don't think you'll rate it as low as Koudelka. So, but I'm very excited. But it's actually encouraging me that whenever it comes up where KJ plays Shadow Hearts on stream, I might actually play alongside you off stream.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because I kind of want to replay them. Like I haven't played them in a really long time,
Mhm.
and like it's been a long time for me to like I haven't played Shadow Hearts since college, so that's like, that's 15 years ago or whatever. So it'd be
Mhm.
really interesting to replay them, at least the first two.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah,
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody for uh hanging out here while we are discuss Kudelka. And yeah, I think we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up here. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Polly, for obviously joining me. Um, and yeah,
yes.
that's the. I guess that's it.
To
So
go on the tangents, I'm glad that I could add some like little bit more little tidbits you didn't know.
yeah, no, that was good.
Um,
That was awesome. I really thought that was